Washington Jr. had an IQ of 69 and read at a second-grade level. When Culpeper County deputies brought him in for questioning in 1983 after an unrelated burglary arrest, he confessed within hours to 5 violent crimes, including the rape and murder of 19-year-old Rebecca Lynn Williams. His statement contained glaring, provable errors. He named the wrong victim, misidentified her race, and could not accurately describe her apartment. Investigators corrected him, and he adjusted his answers to match their prompts. In 1984, he was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. He came within 9 days of execution in 1985. The confession was the sole evidence against him. DNA would later prove he did not commit the crime. He nonetheless spent 17 years in Virginia prisons, including time on death row. Earl Washington Jr. was born in Fauquier County, Virginia, in 1960 and was 22 at arrest. His intellectual disability was central to the case, not incidental. An IQ in the 60 to 70 range qualifies as mild intellectual disability and carries predictable vulnerabilities in custodial settings. Research shows such defendants are more likely to acquiesce to authority, to echo suggestions, and to fail to grasp the legal consequences of signing statements. Washington lacked counsel during interrogation, endured hours of questioning, and signed documents he could not fully read. What investigators treated as a confession was, in reality, a series of adaptations by a man who did not understand the process or its stakes. The confession itself is instructive. In its original form, it failed basic factual tests. The wrong victim. Rather than treat these discrepancies as disqualifying, investigators fed corrective information. Washington then incorporated that information into a revised statement. This pattern, the suspect absorbing details supplied by interrogators and producing a seemingly accurate account, is a documented mechanism of false confessions. At trial, jurors saw only the corrected, signed confession. They were not informed that the document had initially contained multiple demonstrable errors. The jury convicted in one day. In September 1985, 9 days before scheduled execution, Governor Chuck Robb commuted Washington's sentence to life imprisonment. The commutation rested on concerns about the quality of Washington's legal representation and his intellectual disability, not on new evidence proving innocence. He was removed from death row, but remained incarcerated. The conviction stood. From that point, until the introduction of conclusive DNA testing, the official conversation focused on representation and procedure rather than on whether the state had imprisoned the actual perpetrator. The man who killed Rebecca Williams remained unidentified and uninvestigated. In 1993, DNA testing entered the record. Biological evidence from the Williams crime scene excluded Earl Washington as the contributor. The science was clear. Washington had not left the seminal biological material recovered at the scene. The Virginia Attorney General's office reviewed the results but did not pursue overturning the conviction. Prosecutors argued that the DNA did not conclusively disprove guilt, suggesting the possibility of multiple participants. The exclusionary test in 1993 did not prompt release. Washington remained imprisoned for 8 more years despite the scientific exclusion. The true perpetrator emerged only after further testing. In 2000, Governor Jim Gilmore granted Washington a conditional pardon, reducing his sentence to time served for the rape conviction, but stopping short of full exoneration. Investigators continued to analyze evidence with improved techniques. By 2001, DNA matched Kenneth Tinsley, a man already incarcerated for an unrelated rape. Tinsley had not previously been investigated in connection with the Williams case and had not been on law enforcement's radar. In 2001, after the match and review, Governor Gilmore granted Washington a full pardon and released him at age 41. This case reveals systemic failure rather than isolated mistake. At each juncture, interrogation, prosecution, trial, appellate review, gubernatorial clemency, and post-conviction analysis, responsible actors had opportunities to reassess the reliability of the conviction and failed to do so. Officers accepted and corrected a confession with documented inaccuracies. Prosecutors presented the corrected version without disclosing its origins. Appellate courts sustained the verdict. The Attorney General's office sought to preserve a conviction despite DNA exclusion. These were choices that preserved an outcome rather than seeking truth. The aftermath underscores the inadequacy of redress. In 2006, Virginia settled Washington's civil rights suit for roughly $200,000, the statutory cap at the time, for 17 years lost to incarceration, including time on death row for a crime he did not commit. The compensation reached the legal maximum, and no officer or prosecutor faced criminal charges or professional discipline. Washington's intellectual disability, the characteristic that made him susceptible to a false confession, did not translate into procedural safeguards during interrogation in 1983. Washington's case sits in the national record as a stark illustration of the danger of treating confessions as self-verifying evidence, especially when vulnerable suspects are involved. It prefaced and informed debates culminating in the Supreme Court's 2002 Atkins v. Virginia decision, which barred execution of individuals with intellectual disability. That ruling came too late for Washington. His ordeal, however, helped crystallize recognition that interrogation conditions and confession reliability cannot be assumed uniform across cognitive capacities. Earl Washington Jr. confessed to a murder he did not commit. He nearly went to his death for it. He changed answers to fit investigators' corrections, signed papers he could not fully comprehend, and spent 17 years behind bars before DNA identified the real killer. Virginia's settlement, without accountability for officials, closed the legal chapter but cannot restore the years taken. Subscribe to Case Files TV, because when interrogation substitutes suggestion for fact, an innocent life can be consumed by the machinery of conviction.